Hello everyone, Sam here, and today we're gonna talk about WARDANCE. This is the last comic from Maelstrom Comics that I'm gonna review for this week, and yeah, this will be another episode of Comic Crazed, which is my review show focused on comic books. I apologize if I seem sort of low energy today. One reason is that I didn't get much sleep last night, and the second reason, there have been two passings of very important figures in the pulp fandom that have kind of been weighing me down. One of them I've known about for a couple days. Second one I learned about just this morning. I'll talk about that in the final few minutes of this review, but if I seem somewhat off today, that's because I've got some stuff on my mind. I'm doing this review mostly just because I'd already written it, and it's something else to do other than stew in depressing emotions, so that's the main reason I'm putting this out today. But to focus on the comic, WARDANCE. This comic was published in 2024, and just like the other Maelstrom comics I've reviewed this week, it was created by Eric Allen Nelson, and it was co-written with Brad Jones, this particular comic. The pencil and inks for this comic were done by Igor Vitorino, and the colors were by Adriano Augusto and Dan Olvera. I've talked about Eric Allen Nelson a fair amount in the last two reviews, but Brad Jones I can't find a whole lot of info about. Some of that is because he has the same name as the man who does the Cinema Snob character, that review show, the Cinema Snob, his name is Brad Jones. So I think my search algorithms keep mixing up who Brad Jones is, but even on Comic Vine and other comic book resources, I can't find anything about him. So, yeah, I don't know anything about Brad Jones. But I do know about Igor Vitorino, because he's actually done art on a lot of comics, particularly grim fairy tales from Zenoscope. Adriano Augusto, he's done coloring on some Dynamite comics works, like Masks 2, which was a team-up of a bunch of pulp characters, and one of the Red Sonya comics. It was called Vulture Circle. And Dan Olvera has done art and coloring for apparently multiple Antarctic press books like Niobe and Exciting Comics. Never read any of them, but they are apparently from Antarctic Press, and that's what works I could find he did. And like the last two Maelstrom comics, I got this particular comic from the Anathema Kickstarter. Like the Vigilant #1, this is digital. There is no physical copy. And it's WARDANCE #1 because it's the first issue in the series. So, like I said, I'm reviewing this because it had come with the Anathema Kickstarter, and I was like, well, might as well review it while it's on my mind. So what is the plot of WARDANCE? Well, the plot is about Sonya, and Sonya is this Native American school teacher on this reservation, this Native American reservation called the White Tail Reservation. And it's in New Mexico, and I believe it's stated to be Navajo. And one day she gets a call from the chief of the tribe on the reservation, and she learns that there was this group of teenage boys who were attacked by some mysterious being while they were playing basketball on the reservation. And it's revealed that Sonya is actually the hero WARDANCE, and she's basically a warrior for the tribe who's imbibed of certain magical and physical abilities. And because of this, she decides to investigate this attack, and she soon learns that a dark force might be behind that act. So that's the essential setup to the story. I'll first talk about what works in this story, because I think out of all of the Maelstrom comics that I've reviewed, this is definitely the most focused. Like, one of the criticisms I had of The Vigilant was that it was kind of all over the place. It was doing a lot of info dumping. It was introducing a lot of different characters. But this story, WARDANCE, felt really focused because it just has this very simple premise, which is Sonya investigating this attack on the teenage boys. And it doesn't deviate from it. It solely focuses on that event and Sonya trying to figure out what's going on. And because it's that focused, it doesn't feel like there's any fat to this story. It feels like it is focusing precisely on what the story needs to focus on. It's not going off in a bunch of different directions. And that, I thought, was a much better tactic than what the Vigilant #1 was doing. But unlike Anathema #1, where I thought that the story was too simplistic to the point that there wasn't much to what was going on, this one, I think there is enough meat to justify this story, because, you know, you get several different scenes and they all revolve around this attack, but it never feels like any of them are extraneous. They are there for a reason, but it doesn't feel like it's breezing over these things and not making a big deal out of them. So it was kind of a Goldilocks situation where it was just right with the amount of plotting and story. I also kind of like that there's this sort of interesting position with Sonya, where she has kind of this unique position in the tribe where she's got this stereotypical nurturing element to her. Like, she's a school teacher. She's teaching the children of the reservation on one of the schools. But she's also got this dual role as the warrior of the tribe, which is a very aggressive and not a nurturing role. It's a very defensive and sometimes destructive role. And I thought that was kind of an interesting character conflict, because there's a lot of interesting inner conflicts you can have with that, of someone who has a job that their superhero persona kind of conflicts with. And it's not necessarily an inner conflict that's given a lot of focus, because, as I said, it is really focused on this attack and Sonya investigating it. But it is sort of this interesting undercurrent of the story, where you're kind of wondering how Sonya feels about these conflicting goals of her existence. And one of the things I really liked about the story is that Sonya herself is likable. Like, one of my complaints about the last two Maelstrom comics is that a lot of the main characters are either not defined enough to where we feel any emotion towards them because we don't really know them, or B, they're really defined by, like, their trauma and the bad stuff that happens to them. And that's not that doesn't make them necessarily bad characters, but it does make them kind of shallow from a writing perspective, because there's nothing else to them other than the fact that they had this trauma before they turned into a superhero. And I think this story does a good job at avoiding that. You see Sonya has this like nice connection to animals. She's very friendly with her students. Her students like her. And she genuinely wants to stop this menace. And that goes a long way, I think, to making this comic a lot more enjoyable than the other two Maelstrom comics I've seen. Because since we have this character who is very likable and who is trying to do the right thing, we do see we do want to see her succeed. And it's not based on trauma or at least trauma against her. She wants to stop other people from getting hurt, which I think is a very noble and respectable thing to yearn for. So because Sonya is a very likable character in this, you do want to see her succeed. I also kind of liked how the story was set on a reservation. And it's not made a big deal of in the actual text. It's kind of more of an undercurrent, but there's kind of this interesting undercurrent of showing the uniqueness of reservation culture, because there's this very heavy sense of larger outside forces don't apply. Because after all, for those that don't know about Native American reservations, they're kind of their own contained countries within the United States, because only federal authorities have any sort of jurisdiction in them. And it's always kind of been a sort of a difficult situation for locals, because a lot of reservations are not very well off. There's a long history of poverty and, well, not mince words about it, drug abuse and reservations not being great places. But this story, I think, does a good job of, they don't overemphasize it like a lot of works that portray reservations do, but they do like make it very clear. There's this undercurrent of the chief goes to Sonya, not just because she's the tribe's protector, but because she's kind of the only one who can do anything in this large reservation, where you have the tribal police and maybe some federal agents, but not much else. And there's this one scene, it's very subtle. They have this thing where one of the boys who survives the attack is at the local medical center. The local medical center on the reservation. But they point out that this is not a great hospital. His injuries are too severe. We have to take him off the reservation to one of the hospitals off of it. And that was something my father, who had been to a fair number of reservations, experienced. He said, yeah, a lot of Native Americans' reservations do not have very good medical centers. And there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's sort of a sad reality of Native American reservations. And I like that it's not made a huge deal of. It's not like something that a lot of more socially, I guess you could say more socially conscious works would emphasize. You know, they would emphasize this as, another issue that we need to address with the reservations. But this one, it's not really, it is treated as a problem, but it's kind of just like this problem that's in the background. It's one small detail in the story. And I always think those sort of small details that bring up sort of political and social issues are a lot more effective than ones that slam it in your face. Because this one, it's not stopping to give a lecture. It's just showing the blunt reality that a lot of native reservations don't have the best health care. And I think that's very impressive that they managed to highlight that without, stopping the story in its tracks. And I also kind of liked that there's sort of this underlying theme to the story that violence on the reservation is not that unusual. And this particular instance of what happens to the teenage boys, it is unusual just by the weird circumstances around it, but there's this heavy implication that that violence in general might not be that unusual on this reservation. And it sort of shows how different people like Sonya or the chief or some of the policemen kind of deal with this sudden onset of violence. And it's kind of like they just have a sort of quiet, stoic way of dealing with it. Which, based on my interactions with some Native Americans, that feels somewhat fitting. There is sort of this stoicism to a lot of tribes, and it made sense for this particular setting. I also thought the antagonist was pretty impressive because it's this mysterious. It's basically a witch. She's this mysterious witch who isn't in the story very long, but she's very creepy for the limited time she's in it, and it does sort of highlight her alien nature, where she's just kind of wanders to these boys and isn't really even talking to him, just kind of talking to someone or something else, and she's just kind of zoned out of this whole situation. And there also a Chupacabra shows up, and that turns out to be the main physical confrontation WARDANCE has with in the comic. And it's a pretty good Chupacabra design. It's not the dog ones, the ones that a lot of people do that are kind of dog-like. This one kind of goes into those more Central American depictions where it's kind of like this weird gremlin alien thing with like long arms. And it's a pretty good design for the Chupacabra. This is a weird thing to praise, but I actually thought for the lack of a better word, fan service and sensuality in this comic was a lot more natural than it was in other Maelstrom comics. I said in the last two reviews for Anathema and the Vigilant that the sensual elements of that story kind of felt off. They were either really uncomfortable or just not very well done. And this one is one where I don't think it became too distracting or unnatural and uncomfortable. Because, when we're introduced to Sonya, it's of course in a shower scene, because that's how a 90s or 2000s style comic would introduce a female main character. And yeah, it's a bit of a sleazy thing, but it is sort of in that style of the 90s era comics, which I have a strong suspicion Eric Allen Nelson is really hearkening back to. And, WARDANCE has a fairly skimpy costume, but again, it's kind of going back to that 90s concept of fan service. Because, if WARDANCE had appeared in this costume in the 90s, nobody would bat an eye. They would just think she's another one of the that wave of bad girl comics. So it's a weird thing to praise, but I think the fan service element here is a lot more natural, and it doesn't get to that uncomfortable level some of these other Maelstrom comics have. There's no awkward scene with the witch doing weird things, or Sonya doing odd things. Like it is what it is. It's the kind of fan service you'd see in a '90s comic. So it doesn't really bother me, and I appreciated that it was at a fairly a much more restrained amount. I also kind of tying into that. I also thought that the violent elements of the comic was much more impactful in this story compared to the other two, and it felt legitimately necessary for the tale because you're dealing with an evil witch, you're dealing with a blood-sucking chupacabra. You're gonna kind of have to need to talk about these things and show the impact of their actions. And it didn't feel, unlike the other ones where the violence could sometimes feel like it was there for the sake of shock value, this one didn't really feel exploitative. It felt like the violence and the impact of it had to be there in order for the story to work. So I kind of like that it doesn't go overboard with the violence, but it does make it clear, these fights with chupacabras are not going to be nice and clean. So I appreciated that element. I also kind of liked WARDANCE has sort of an interesting power set because she's super strong, she's fairly fast, and she has certain magical abilities. And the one that I kind of liked the most was this power of summoning animal spirits to battle. Like she summons a wolf, she summons a bear to help her fight the chupacabra. And I've always kind of liked that concept of animal companions, whether they're real animals or spirits, helping out the main hero. That's always a cool concept to me. And I thought it was a lot of fun in this story. So now I want to talk about what I think didn't work with the comic. And it's kind of weird. This is one where I feel like my issues with it are kind of the opposite of Anathema and the Vigilant. Because the problem I had with those two books was that the art was very impressive, but I had a lot of issues with the writing. This is a weird one where, with WARDANCE, I actually like the writing more, and it's the art I actually have a problem with. Because I don't know much about these artists. I don't know if this is indicative of a lot of their work, but the actual art by Ego Vitorino, it feels a little off at times. Like the characters seem a little janky, and there's parts where it kind of seems like the drawing, like certain details weren't fully added. Apparently Vitorino did the inking on this as well. So this wasn't a thing where the inker and the artist weren't on the same level. This is just something I feel like maybe Vitorino added certain details, but he didn't add others. It's one of those things that's hard to describe, but the art just kind of seemed a little wonky. Like there were certain amounts of detail missing, or certain poses that looked a little off. It's kind of hard to describe, but it felt a little underdone in some spots. I also thought the coloring by Adriano Augusto and Dan Olvera, it was mostly decent, but there was some spotty coloring in certain moments. Like there were spots where I was like, this feels a little off. Like sometimes it was with skin tones, other times it was stuff in the background. But yeah, this was a weird thing where the art and coloring felt a little off. The other problem is the lettering. This was a problem I had with Anathema, but not the Vigilant. I thought the Vigilant, it was Eric Foster who did the lettering on that, and I think that made a world of difference for that comic because it did make it seem a lot more polished than Anathema did. And unfortunately, I think WARDANCE suffers because there wasn't a letterer. I didn't see a letterer credited for this, and yeah, you can kind of tell that this was just sort of plopped in with tech software into the art. Like, it is very bare bones, and it isn't interesting. You know, the formatting for the letters doesn't really change with a lot of it. Aside from maybe the Chupacabra and the Witch, I think it might do some different things with that, but just not a lot of lettering here. And it also doesn't help. There's a lot of grammatical errors in the word bubbles, which, again, I know it's an independent comic and things sometimes are not as polished, but the Vigilant had pretty good grammar and lettering, and that one didn't feel off with that regard. This one, the grammatical errors and the very bare bones lettering, it made the comic feel somewhat cheaper than it actually was. So that was kind of a bummer. I also think that the dialogue was kind of a problem with this because it was pretty clunky in a lot of spots, and some of it you can say like, oh well, it's the speaking style of this particular tribe, because in a lot of media, Native Americans are depicted as speaking with this very solemn, stoic, very formal phrasing when they're speaking in English. But I don't know. Something about this felt somewhat off. Like, it didn't feel like how people would actually talk. And it's one of those things, again, it's kind of hard to explain, but reading some of the dialogue, I was going, I'm not sure somebody in this situation would say this. And again, maybe some of it is because of those grammatical errors. It was kind of throwing me off about, what the characters are trying to say and what it actually means. But then you get the scenes where you have a couple of scenes where the teenagers are talking amongst themselves, and they don't sound like teenagers. They sound like people that have been written by someone who is much older. And, it's one of those things where I was like, okay, yeah, those parts kind of felt a little awkward. Okay, the final thing I wrote down is kind of bothering me is that Sonya has like this wolf companion, and she also has a dog. I think the dog is meant to be separate from the wolf, but I'm not entirely sure. But the wolf companion who shows up, and it's meant to be sort of Sonya's sidekick. The wolf is meant to help her track the witch and the missing boy. But again, he doesn't get much characterization before he jumps into action. And you might say, well, yeah, it's a wolf. What characterization can you give? Well, actually, a lot. Because if you've seen plenty of comics with animal sidekicks, they can have a fair amount of personality, and it doesn't involve, thought bubbles. The artist can show their personalities through their actions. So I was kind of bummed he didn't get much time to establish his personality. And you notice I'm not even calling him by his name because I couldn't even figure out what his name was. I'm not sure it's even mentioned. So, yeah, that part was kind of the bummer for me in regards to characterization. So the final ranking of WARDANCE. This was an interesting one because I had a gut reaction when I first read it to give a 2 out of 5 ranking. For those that don't know, I rank on the 5-star system, 0 out of 5 being the worst, 5 out of 5 being the best. 2 out of 5 in my verbiage is a painfully average story. It's what I gave The Vigilant earlier this week. But the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking about the things that really did work in this story, comparing it with the things that didn't, the more I kind of realized this is more of a 3 out of 5 stars story, which is pleasantly average in my verbiage. And I think it's a 3 out of 5 star because it's definitely the roughest of the Maelstrom comics that I've read from a production standpoint, because the art feels off, the coloring feels off, the lettering feels off. And from that presentation standpoint, yeah, it's probably the weakest of the 3 I've read, because the other 2 stories did have, whatever their flaws were, they had strong art and strong coloring. But I think what really made this a better experience for me is that the writing, the actual writing is much tighter in this story. It was, like I said, it's very simplistic, it's lower stakes, but I think that makes it more interesting. We get to see this one event and see how Sonya tries to deal with it with her abilities. So I think it pushed it from a 2 stars to a 3 stars for me, just because it did feel like it wasn't overextending itself. And also, I felt, even though this is the first part in a multi-part story, this felt like a even though this story isn't self-contained, because it was so focused on that investigation and learning the next step of what has to happen, it didn't feel like Anathema did, where it felt like it just ended at an arbitrary point and was just sort of sequel baiting. This one, it does feel like, okay, this is a good place to stop the story. Let's see where it goes from here. So, with all that in mind, that kind of bumped it up to a 3 out of 5 stars for me, because it felt much better and well put together from a writing standpoint. And the writing was really what was kind of bugging me throughout a lot of these Maelstrom comics. So that's what sort of made it a 3 out of 5 stars for me personally. And, you know, this was a good enough experience. I might check out the rest of the WARDANCE series. I'm really not that interested in the Anathema or the Vigilant. I just don't think they're going to interest me. But I might be curious to see where WARDANCE goes. So that'd be kind of, I might check that out in the future. And I would recommend this to anyone who's into Native American superheroes. If you're into that kind of character, you would probably get something out of this. You might enjoy it. Like I said, if you want to see kind of go back to that era of the 90s and 2000s when they had those edgier comics with more sensuality and violence, you might enjoy this too. I would say out of the 3 I've reviewed of Maelstrom comics, this is the one that I think captures that 90s vibe the best. So, yeah, check it out if you're interested in those kinds of comics. Any inspiration? For those that don't know, whenever I do these reviews, I like to talk about whether the story has inspired me in any way for my own writing. And I really like that concept of modern Native American warriors. That's kind of been something that's been in the back of my mind for a couple of years now, because I've traveled out west a couple of times, and it is kind of this interesting iconography of Native Americans, uh, that idea of the Native American warrior. And, I grew up in a home dominated by Westerns, and, yeah, the Native Americans were often the bad guys, but they were very much commendable warriors in a lot of these old Westerns I watched. And I think the idea of doing like modern Native American warriors is kind of an interesting concept. It's one I've wanted to visit for a long time. And I also really like the idea of a female Native American warrior who's trying to find ways to defend her people. And that's just kind of an interesting concept in general to me. It's like that's a pretty good starting point for a character there. So maybe something will come out of that. So that is all I have to say for War Dance. This will be the last Maelstrom comics I review for a while. Like I said, I may check out the other War Dance issues, but I'm probably not going to do much with the rest of their content. Because out of the 3 stories of theirs I've read, I've liked one. I'm just not sure I'm really vibing with what they put out. So that'll be the end of that. And the other thing, I said this in the beginning, I was kind of morose, but I'm kind of morose because I've been hit by 2 significant deaths this week in regards to the pulp fandom. The first was my boss, Steve Donoso, at the Shadowed Circle. He unfortunately expired early this week on Monday from his pancreatic cancer. It was something we were all kind of expecting to happen at some point, but everyone kind of thought it might be later in like September or October, but that wasn't to be. And so he passed away early this week, and we at the Shadowed Circle have to figure out what we're going to do. We have a decent idea of what we're going to do. I'm not going to disclose it here, but we have to figure that out with Steve's passing. And the second one, the one that I'm still kind of processing along with Steve, I learned about it this morning when I was on Facebook. But Will Murray, the famous pulp historian and writer, he's written a lot of different pulp characters. He apparently passed away earlier this week too. And Will Murray was a huge contributor to the Shadowed Circle. I think we had an article of his in like almost all the issues we put out, and even the books we put out. And nobody was expecting Will Murray's passing. Like, nobody I knew heard about him having any health problems. I met and talked with him at Pulp Fest this year. And, he seemed fine for a guy in his early 70s, So, this is a kind of a shock. I'm really not sure what to make of it right now myself. Next week, when my thoughts are a little more collected, I want to do a video about Steve and Tim. Not Tim. Sorry, I'm getting mixed up again. I don't know what the hell, how to collect my thoughts at this point. Steve and Will. I'm going to do a brief video next week talking about them. Talking about my relationship with them. For obvious reasons, I had more of a relationship with Steve because I was working for him. And I only met Will in person twice, but yeah, I'm gonna do something next week to talk about them. So yeah, like I said, this is just kind of a weird thing. I don't think anybody in the pulp fandom waking up this morning was expecting Will Murray, arguably the biggest name in the pulp fandom, to not be with us anymore. So it's just an odd feeling. So I'll have a video next week talking about Steve and Will, and talking about them as I experienced them. It won't be for the Shadowed Circle or any organization I'm part of. It'll just be my own personal reminiscences. So yeah, that'll happen next week sometime. I just don't know. Like I said, I'm still figuring this out. So all right, well that is all I'm gonna do for now, because it's all I can do for now. So all right, well, I'll see you guys later. Bye.